Good afternoon, and welcome to this session. My name is Elizabeth Anderson, and I am the Executive Director of the Basel Institute on Governance, and it's my honor to be moderating today's session. We are gathered here to discuss and undertake a bit of stock taking on implementation of Resolution 812. It's been 6 years since this groundbreaking resolution was adopted by the Conference of State Parties to address the connection between corruption, crime, and protection of the environment. And we at the Basel Institute have been pleased to be tracking progress on implementation of this resolution since that time, and trying to identify best practices and promote those with member states to ensure effective implementation of this resolution. A couple of years ago, we published in this context Seedlings of Hope, a report that documented some of the progress made at that time. And we're happy this week to be launching Saplings of Hope. So our little tree is growing, as you can see. And that report, again, identifies some of the best practices that we see emerging, and also some of the recommendations that we have for the path forward. How do we scale implementation and strengthen it among member states? An executive summary of the report is over here, and the full report is on our website, and I encourage you to dig into it. This is a wonderful panel to help us understand both the progress that we have made to date and the opportunities and challenges going forward. We will begin today's session with opening remarks from John Brandolino, who needs no introduction. He is the acting executive director of the UNODC and a very busy person here this week. And so after his remarks, we'll excuse John to attend to other matters and dig into a detailed conversation with our panelists. And they are Marcelo Pontes, Secretary of Private Integrity from the Office of Comptroller General in Brazil, His Excellency Mr. Vasco Sampofu, Permanent Representative of Namibia to the United Nations, and standing in for Sarah Lister, Anga Timilsina, who is a global advisor on anti-corruption at UNDP. So without further ado, let me turn the floor over to John.
Thank you, Betsy, and thank you everyone for being here. I have to leave early, but it's not, it has no reflection on the importance of this issue. It is, I think, a critical one. And it is kind of remarkable that, as Betsy said, we have a resolution only 6 years ago that we started to really deal with this topic and decide that it had to be dealt with in the context of the Conference of the States Parties. That was the Resolution 812, not only affirming that corruption is a key enabler of crimes that affect the environment, but also that anti-corruption tools, we can design tools that are effective in dealing with that particular type of crime and making them less viable and less profitable. And since then, I have to say, countries have taken action. That's our view from UNODC. Across a number of regions, we've seen actions including new legislation relating to this area, strong regulatory frameworks, expanded investigative powers, along with certain transparency reforms and enhanced oversight over natural resource management. And because member states have been interested in this area, we've been able to, as UNODC, and I'm sure others, we've been proud to help support the momentum in this area. So we've worked with a number of authorities around the world, including helping integrate corruption risk management processes in 28 institutions in 14 countries. We have assisted several institutions to improve transparency and accountability in the management of natural resources through clear standard operating procedures that also affect and address the potential for corruption. We've worked with staff and managers to improve knowledge of ethics and integrity in their profession, included targeted surveys that have provided, very valuable information into staff challenges and performance and how institutions can be better developed to guard against any issues. And also we've done some interesting things in the awareness raising efforts, because I think that is a key part of it. To have, we need to make people not just dealing with the institutions that manage and investigate these crimes and prosecute these crimes. But we need to have the citizenry more aware of what these crimes are, how they're committed, and also, give them the opportunity to report on them. So we've, for example, we've worked to raise awareness of the dangers posed by corruption and economic crime to our planet. That's been one. And then we had an interactive workshop that we designed for young people to highlight the risks between corruption and climate change, in our partnership with the World Bank to improve the understanding of economic crime and climate finance. So we've done work with the World Bank also, because when we find that when everybody is aware of the risks and the consequences, everyone is more eager to and better equipped to make the right choices and to hold accountable those who seek to exploit the profits from this type of crime. And we need to, that includes providing them the channels to be able to report on these things, safe channels, and make sure that they don't feel like they're in danger in any way in reporting potential crimes in this area. So today's focus on the environment at the CoSP is a testament, as I mentioned, to a strength of cooperation and momentum in this area. 12 agencies from different countries, 9 non-governmental organizations, and 5 international organizations have come together to organize this series of events, share knowledge, and discuss solutions. Much work needs to be done, still needs to be done. Criminal networks adapt quickly, so we need to also be dealing with this crime and be looking at how it's evolving and from day to day. But it's encouraging that we are focusing on this, that we're having a series of events on this, and that that member states are discussing an updated resolution on this. It's not just updated from a technical point of view. We see it as a potential to have some real progress and steps forward. Of course, it's up to them, and they're the ones that make the decisions. But we stand ready as UNODC to help them move forward once this resolution hopefully will be passed at the end of the week. So let's all step up our efforts against this type of corruption, dismantle the criminal businesses, models that prey on our shared planet, and leave a safer and more sustainable planet for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for those remarks, starting us off just right, I think, and for all the work that you do to combat corruption, and in particular, as it affects the environment. Best wishes for the rest of the conference. Okay, now we are going to dig into some experience from different organizations and countries and identify the lessons that we can learn and the path forward. So I'll have 2 rounds of questions. I'll begin by asking each of our panelists to identify one example of particularly effective efforts to implement Resolution 812 and the difference that you see it playing. And let me start with you, Marcelo, from the experience of Brazil.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. Let me first comment on the UNODCs, the Basel Institute, and all the institutions that were involved in the organization of this event to make it highlight how important this topic is currently for, I believe, every single country represented here. So to talk about the Brazilian experience regarding this topic, I think first I would give a very brief background, is that the topic of the protection of environment has been consistently a problem that Brazil was really engaged on treat. First of all, we have set in our constitution, which was established in 1980, several specific provisions that deals with the protection environment. It even states that is one of the rights of every single person in the world that they have the access to an ecological balanced environment, and also imposes on the government and the society as a whole the duty to defend and preserve the environment for the future generations. That has been there since '82. And along the years, of course, Brazil being such a big country with such a variety of environments and borders and everything, we had throughout the years put a lot of priority on fighting specific crimes on environment. In 2001, so it has been 24 years now, our federal police established first a special division that would only treat with crimes related to the environment. This has already evolved to a bigger structure, so it also emphasizes how prioritized this topic is for us. But talking specifically to the resolution 80/12, I think that helped us take into consideration that to protect the environment, and we would need to take it on a more comprehensive approach, meaning that a lot of the times the crimes involve the environment, they also involves other types of crimes, such as corruption, such as money laundering. And I would like just to highlight 3 examples that I believe would exemplify here this more comprehensive approach. First is the need to have a better coordination of different law enforcement agencies. Brazil, as many countries, has a multi-agency approach to different types of illicits and crimes. And for the past years, we have tried to put together what's the relevance of each agency on tackling illicits that also has to deal with the environment. One very important example of this coordination was a specific operation that was conducted early in this year. And Operation Brazil, we call it specifically when there is a joint effort by several bodies to tackle a specific case. Operation Rejeito, which could be translated as useless, was a joint investigation conducted both by the CGU, which is our internal audit body at Brazil, the Federal Police, the Federal Prosecution Service, and the Federal Revenue Service. The case involved basically the removal of several officials that were in the position to permit or not the exploitation of minerals there in Brazil, that were being bribed to permit illicit and illegal minerals extraction. There was a huge scheme of money laundering and also to permit the exportation of those illegal minerals. So the total amounting of money that money and goods and other types of assets that we were able to seizure during this operation rounds up to 1 billion reais, which roughly converts to $300 million. So that was a very big scheme. The second one would be the need to improve the integrity of the agencies who deals with the protection of environment. As you can imagine, there is a lot of different interests and high interests when there is the need to approve a permission to a specific company or specific project to take place there that might affect the environment. Should that take place, the company or the project needs to have approval that goes from studies of the impact on the environment and so on. One thing that's really important that we believe to strengthen the protection of the environment is to make sure that those types of procedures have really good governance. Because we can see change of governments, change of political perspective, and also, as I said before, it's a topic that attracts a lot of different interests, that the governance of this procedure follows a very technical approach, not being hostage by other types of interests. In that regard, we have developed last year a specific guide on integrity in environmental licensing, which aims to help the public officials who are specifically in these tasks so that they can set up better mechanisms, better governance when deciding this type of licenses. My time, I think, ran up already. So maybe in the next question, I can talk a little bit more about the third perspective, which is to engage with the private sector. But thank you so much, Elita.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. And you've started us off very well, highlighting the complexity of these cases requiring a coordination among many different law enforcement actors in order to have the kind of success that you've had, and also the importance of integrity protection in environmental agencies, and how the resolution has catalyzed this change in Brazil, even though you had begun work in this area long before. Ambassador, let me turn to you and ask you to share the experience of Namibia and how the resolution is changing your work.
Thank you so much, and for inviting us to this very important event that addresses a very, very important aspect of my government. Thank you so much. We appreciate the opportunity to participate. It's important to say at the outset, preventing and combating corruption as it relates to crimes that affect the environment is one of Namibia's priority in the fight against corruption and the preservation of the environment. Firstly, Madam Moderator, Namibia's obligation to implement measures to prevent, combat, and prosecute corruption as it relates to the environment stems from the Constitution of the Republic of Namibia. This includes implementing measures to prevent the dumping and recycling of foreign nuclear and toxic waste on Namibian territory. Secondly, and to be specific, Article 95 of the Constitution of the Republic of Namibia stipulates that the state shall actively promote and maintain the welfare of the people by adopting policies that include the maintenance of ecosystems, essential ecological processes, and biological diversity of Namibia, and utilization of living natural resources on a sustainable basis for the benefits of all Namibians and future generations. Corruption as a core driver of environment crime has negative economic consequences in that it reduces the country's resources. It also poses a serious threat to food security and livelihoods. In this regard, the protection of environment is viewed as a major issue for economic development in Namibia. Secondly, Namibia is a signatory to regional, continental, and the United Nations legal instruments on environmental protection. As early as 1968, the Organization of African Unity, which preceded the African Union, signed a comprehensive document on environmental protection, namely the African Convention on the Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources to enhance environmental protection, which is very important for us. In 2003, Namibia had played a role in terms of shaping this, and structures to facilitate effective implementation mechanisms to encourage compliance, enforcement of crime prevention, and preservation of the environment. Sustainable utilization of natural resources and effective protection of the environment have been laid out as a basic objective of the SADC, that's the Southern African Development Community, in its founding document, like I referred to earlier on. The SADC Treaty and member states in that regard had agreed to cooperate in area of natural resources and environment. Namibia is also signatory to various SADC protocols which aim to ensure implementation of legal mechanisms to fight crimes against the environment. Such protocols that contain provisions for environmental crime prevention as related to energy, fisheries, forestry, health, tourism, trade, transport, communication, and meteorology, mining, wildlife conservation, and law enforcement, shared water resource system. The list goes on and on and on. Now, since the adoption of 812, that's the UN resolution, what is it Namibia has done in terms of introducing domestic measures to address the issues that we're talking about? In light of the government's commitment to environmental protection, Namibia's preventive measures were taken through an enactment of relevant laws and establishment of institutions to prevent, investigate, and prosecute corruption as relates to crimes which impact the environment. Such laws, among others, are the Anti-Corruption Commission, the Prevention of Organized Crime Act, Financial Intelligence Act, and the Namibia Environmental Management Act, to mention but a few. Namibia has also introduced beneficial ownership transparency, which is a critical mechanism in fighting corruption as it relates to environmental crime. Today, corporate vehicles like the companies, trusts, foundations, and legal entities, fictitious entities, and unincorporated economic organizations that are potentially used in organizing crime and corruption are required by law to provide beneficial ownership information. This financial intelligence law places an obligation on the register of the company and the master of the High Court, who are responsible for registration of legal status, to collect and keep up to date beneficial ownership information. Madam Moderator. Secondly, we saw the adoption of the Green Plan as a domestic measure also to promote the issues that we're talking about. The plan laid the basis for a number of legal processes and community engagement to conserve and manage resources for development. Some substantive outcomes of Namibia's Green Plan have been enacted in the Environmental Act, which is already mentioned. The law provides the legal foundation for environmental protection in the country through environmental impact assessments and strategic environmental assessments, integrated regional land use plans, community-based natural resource management, including Namibia's world-renowned communal conservancies, community forests, and community-based management of water resources and fisheries, a thriving nature-based tourism sector supported by the progressive policy framework on tourism and wildlife concessions on state land. Thirdly, one further outcome of Namibia's Green Plan was the establishment of the Environmental Investment Fund. The Green Plan recognizes that the health of individuals, society, and economy are linked to the health of the environment. Accordingly, the objective is to manage its natural resources for present use without jeopardizing the future accessibility of these resources. Then, in the third place, we have the environmental assessment policy. This policy obliges Namibia to place a higher priority on maintaining ecosystems as related to ecological process and to uphold maximum biological diversity. The policy recognizes that environmental assessments are key tools implementing the integrated environmental management. The policy also gained legislative effectiveness by the Environmental Management Act, as earlier mentioned. The law criminalizes the illegal conduct of forests in Namibia, such as unlawful expansion of the land for agriculture, the cutting of wood for domestic use, unlawful cleaning and infrastructure development, uncontrolled wildfires, selective logging through timber concessions, and unlicensed curio caving and habitat destruction. Namibia is a tourist destination country with a wide variety of biodiversity, with 2 global diversity hotspots like the Spiergebied in the succulent Karoo biome and the Namibia escarpment zone, 5 Ramsar sites of international importance with a surface of about 676,464 hectares. Orange River mouth, Babota Okavango River Ramsar site, Walvis Bay, Tosha Pen, and Sandwood Harbor. These are a large wildlife population, including the world's largest population of cheetah and black rhino, white rhino, some of the greatest population of marine life found anywhere in the world in the nutrition-rich waters of the coastline, and the exceptional level of plant diversity, of which many plants are endemic. Lastly, we have also introduced a national policy on tourism for Namibia. The policy stresses that government will engage tourism that is environmental, socially, and economically suitable, while aiming to provide a framework for the mobilization of tourism resources to realize economic growth, unemployment creation, and reduced inequalities. The tourism policy further acknowledges that the sustainability is linked to the protection of natural resource base, and thus strongly provides for strict adherence to the principle of sustainable tourism, which implies that tourism activities should be planned in such a way that visitor satisfaction is achieved, the industry is profitable, the fragile environment is protected, and natural resources are used sparingly for the benefit of current and future generations. Namibia's biodiversity is a real treasure which must be protected by domestic laws and global resolutions and declarations to which Namibia is party to. Government, through the Ministry of Environment and Tourism, has developed a national strategy for wildlife protection and law enforcement. This strategy recognizes that the illegal killing of wildlife in Namibia has implications for the environment, economy, social aspect, as well as animal welfare. The strategy reviews current crime statistics and trends to serve as a baseline for measuring impacts and outlines the key requirements for protecting valuable and endangered species. In conclusion, Namibia has introduced many measures in line with the UN Resolution 812. We remain committed to the implementation in the terms of the resolution and follow-up resolution relating to preventing and combating crime as it relates to crimes that impact the environment. It is a constitutional obligation for us, and there's no way to go about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that really impressive tour of all of the initiatives that your government has undertaken historically to protect the environment, and then accelerating those efforts in the wake of the adoption of the resolution in 2019 to enact protections for the environment, and particularly against crime and corruption that affects the environment in laws, building the institutions of accountability around that, integrating these concerns in the Green Plan, in your environmental assessment policy, and in your national policy on tourism. Certainly, Namibia has much at stake in this area, and we are all grateful for your efforts and the model that your government is setting. Let me turn now to Anga. From the UNDP perspective, you have a global view of some of the impact that this resolution has had over the last 6 years, and we're eager to hear about it.
Thank you, Betsy, and good afternoon, everyone. Despite heavy rain, it's good to have 40, 50 motivated people in this room. Thank you once again. Now, going straight to answering your questions about UNDP's contribution to Resolution 8/12 titled Preventing and Combating Corruption, it relates to crimes impacting the environment. Let me just also mention that, as many of you know, UNDP is a development agency with a broad mandate on environmental sustainability. And we have our programs, global programs, regional programs, and country-level programs. But in particular, what is unique about UNDP is our partnership with the Global Environmental Facility. If you just look at data, since 1991, this facility, JEF, has spent $25 billion, and UNDP has implemented $8 billion in cumulative grant. So what we did since this resolution, we at least try to do these 2-3 key, initiatives. Number one, we try to bring different teams together. We have different teams in UNDP. We have environment team, we have governance team, we have finance team. So as the resolution clearly mentions the multi-stakeholder approach to the issue of governance and promoting transparency or combating corruption, so now we are increasingly working together, our governance team, environmental team, even digital team these days, together with finance and so on. Then we also promote our advocates. For example, the advocates, meaning the civil society networks, local communities, women and youth networks. More than that, as Joan was mentioning earlier, we are also trying to strengthen the whole anti-corruption ecosystem, working together, of course, with the World Bank and our UNODC colleagues. For example, in Iraq, we have this program on environmental justice that aims to strengthen capacity of justice sector, promoting accountability in environmental governance, overall bringing anti-corruption institution and environmental institution and so on. But more specifically, what we also did like UNODC is to focus more on anti-corruption safeguards and mechanism in the context of our environmental projects. So actually now our JEF initiative, our JEF funded project have this anti-corruption mechanism like minimum fiduciary standards to ensure accountability and transparency in the use of JEF financing, independent investigation functions to address fraudulent and corrupt practices, a hotline for reporting unethical and corrupt practices, the whistleblower protection along with grievances and accountability mechanism, and finally the transparency in reporting. So all these anti-corruption measure has to be there if we have to approve the JEF related funding project. So that's, I think, the key. And on the other hand, we also have extractive industry initiatives in many countries, and we are also trying to mitigate corruption risk by providing guidelines to mitigate various risks, looking into entire value chain of the extractive industry. For example, the phase 1 is designing policies, legislation, regulatory institution. Phase 2 is about renegotiating consensus and, concessions and contracts. Phase 3 is about compliance during extraction operations, and phase 4 is strengthening revenue generation and fiscal management. And finally, phase 5 is promoting expenditure management to ensure integrity in each and every stages. So on innovation and technology side, we are also trying to tap into as much as we can, like in Sri Lanka and Uganda, for example. We are using data and digital monitoring tools to combat illegal environmental practices and enhance integrity in resource management. They are using drones, by the way, to monitor whether the tree is there or not yesterday. So you can actually pull that data together in a data dashboard so that you can have an idea about how community can effectively monitor these resources. I think let me stop here. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anga, for that very inspiring list of initiatives that UNDP has undertaken to implement and how the resolution has really changed the work that you're doing, and also for bringing out the issue of technology, which is a theme of this CoSP and certainly an important tool in our toolbox going forward. Recognizing we have about 10 minutes left and wanting to keep us on time, I'm going to ask my panelists to keep your response to the last question short, 1 or 2 minutes. But really importantly, we want to look forward to the prospect of a new resolution and where do we take this work from here. We at the Basel Institute, as I mentioned, we've published this new Saplings of Hope report, which really emphasizes recommendations to scale this work and, importantly, a paradigm shift, which we are arguing is needed here to move beyond thinking exclusively of this issue of corruption as it relates to crime that affects the environment and thinking more broadly of corruption that affects the environment without necessarily the criminal nexus. So that's our proposal for the path forward, and I'm eager to hear from our panelists for the ideas that their organizations and governments have. Let's go in the same order. Marcelo.
Okay, so as Elizabeth mentioned, Brazil, along with Namibia, is tabling a resolution during this CoSP specifically on how the relationship between corruption and the impact on environment. So what we are trying to bring new in this resolution, and negotiations are still going on, which really takes time and effort. But what we are aiming to do here is to build up on what was already in Resolution 8/12 and to provide more practical guidance. So I already mentioned about the need to coordination among different law enforcement authorities. One of the aspects that we are trying to put in this new resolution is the need of money laundering prevention in sectors with high risk on environment. That might be the chance for us to call upon the need to identify who are the enablers of crimes that affect the environment, that usually maybe not be the same ones that are more commonly used in other types of corruption. We are also as I mentioned, the first question, the need to establish strong governance mechanisms that are long-lasting and that technically make decisions based on technical aspects and are strong enough to prevent from the bad influence of big interest of investors that does not take into consideration environment. Third, I would highlight that we are also pushing forward an agenda on the need of transparency on data related to environment. This part is extremely relevant to Brazil, considering that sometimes this discussion may be taken to misleading informations, data that is not sufficiently shared in a way that we can actually know what's happening and how we need to tackle it. So we are pushing for this agenda as well. And finally, the need also to bring the private sector alongside in this journey, that the private sector has a very important role that they need also to address how they can promote their business in a profitable way, but also environmental cautions. So that's basically the 4 priorities that we're trying to move forward. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Marvelous, an ambitious agenda. Ambassador.
Thank you so much. I'll be very short in this regard. And despite the measures that we've put in place, I think challenges still exist. First and foremost, we need to capacitate the officials that work directly or who are investigating these issues that are related to crimes that affect the environment. I think is number one. Secondly, I think there should be also technical assistance, especially to institutions. I'm talking about like the anti-corruption agencies, the police, financial intelligence, audit institution, and those prosecuting authorities that are directly involved into this process. In the third place, I think it's important also to say, I think international community, there's a lack of international support from the international community in terms of fighting these crimes. So with this resolution, we think we can gather that momentum in terms of its implementation. Despite all these challenges, we're optimistic as a country that we can, if we work together, that we can overcome these challenges. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think all of us in this room share that optimism, and certainly with your leadership are hoping to see it come to fruition. Anga.
Just in 2 minutes regarding the paradigm shift. I think we need to capitalize on opportunities while simultaneously addressing key challenges. What I mean by opportunity is that obviously we have very increased global awareness now. We discuss integrity and anti-corruption issues in the climate change conference, as well as now we do in our conference of the state parties. And thanks to Maria, Daniela, and UNODC colleagues who put together very good event in Atlanta. I was also part of it. And this is also the testimony that we are increasingly coming together, both the environment community and anti-corruption governance community. Then the second issue is, Betsy, you mentioned earlier about technological innovation for transparency and accountability. We obviously need to do more. And also multi-stakeholder collaboration and partnership. The youth was mentioned earlier, and communities, we also mentioned that. And we also need to tap into other openness, communities as well. Now there is this transparency and openness in natural resource management, like forestry, fishery, or extractive industries, and so on. But then we also need to look at all these, existing capacity gaps or challenges from weak governance structure and lack of transparency in environmental management. There is limited capacity of anti-corruption authorities and communities regarding environmental crimes or the crimes related to different, areas of environment. And then we also have national and international criminal networks when it comes about environmental crimes and so on. How do we deal with it? There are also issues of illicit financial flows there, the crime, going from one country to another country, the proceeds, and so on. And then the final point is that if we don't have resources to fight climate change, then how do we even fight corruption there? So we need more resources, both fighting corruption as well as fighting climate change too. Now we see we have some kind of, not some kind of, we see a lot of challenges globally in both fronts. Let me just stop there. You know what I mean. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I think this discussion has illustrated very effectively the difference that the kind of attention that we've seen in the CoSP through Resolution 812 can make, and how it has catalyzed important change on the ground over the last 6 years, really dramatic efforts to enact laws that criminalize these actions that affect the environment and bring a corruption lens to that work, and develop multi-agency efforts to enforce those laws, integrating this understanding of the threat across our agencies and our efforts to protect the environment. And yet there is enormous work yet to be done. And certainly it makes the case for a strong new resolution to be adopted this week. And we thank the governments represented here for their leadership on that effort, and the ideas, the concrete ideas that you all have shared for how we can take this work forward. So please join me in thanking the co-organizers of this event with the Basel Institute, the governments of Brazil and Namibia and UNODC, and our really excellent panelists here for this rich discussion.